The film opens on a beautiful stretch of grassland dotted with sheep. The land and the flock both belong to a shepherd named George Hardy, a man who lives quietly in a caravan at the edge of the field. This particular morning, he sits down to write back to someone named Rebecca, filling the letter with warmth and tender words. In it, George confesses that the greatest joy in his life has always been his sheep. And these aren't just any sheep. Every single one has a name. There are the head-butting twins, Ronnie and Reggie. There's the dignified elder, Sir Richfield. There's Cloud, graceful and blessed with the thickest wool of the bunch. Little Zora is endlessly curious about everything. Moople is the calm, patient one, and Wool-Eyes gets his name from the fur that constantly covers his eyes. Every one of them is special, but George holds a soft spot for one in particular, a solitary ram named Sebastian. And then there's Lily, the clever one, a sheep who seems to know exactly what George is thinking and feeling before he even says a word. George's days follow a gentle rhythm. He feeds the flock, shears their wool, and mixes up a blue medicine to treat Richfield, who has come down with a nasty case of orf. When the work is done and evening settles in, he reads to his sheep from his favorite detective novels. After one such reading, the sheep fall into a lively argument about how the story will end. And Lily, the smartest among them, already knows the ending, even though George hasn't finished the book yet.
Don't you see? I figured it out 2 chapters ago.
The next day, her theory turns out to be exactly right. They have a knack for solving mysteries. The sheep detectives. Around this time, we meet 3 young lambs named Daisy, Oliver, and Pickles. Most of George's sheep were born in spring, but one lamb arrived in the dead of winter. He has no name of his own, so we'll just call him Trump. And Trump is different. He keeps to himself, not by choice, but because the spring-born flock has quietly pushed him out. Still, George loves him all the same. One Sunday morning, the sound of church bells drifts across the field, and George makes his way into the nearby town of Denbrook, just a short walk from his pasture. Here we're introduced to the townsfolk. First there's Caleb, another shepherd George can't stand. Then Ham, the butcher, who George likes even less. Beth runs the local inn and has no love for George either. In fact, she once said out loud that she wanted him dead. The town's one and only police officer is Derry, who is, to put it kindly, not the sharpest. And finally, there's Reverend Hillcott leading his congregation. George has only come this morning to settle a debt, and once that's done, he leaves. That night, George writes to Rebecca again, telling her all about his flock and how badly they want to meet her, and how badly he wants that too. The following morning, while the sheep are grazing and chatting, Caleb pulls up in a shiny red car with 2 dogs the sheep adore. Caleb heads into the caravan. Meanwhile, Ronnie and Reggie catch sight of that gleaming car and feel an overwhelming urge to ram it, until Lily stops them, reminding them there's no charging into anything without a good reason. Moople sidles up to Lily and mentions that Caleb has now visited 3 times this month. Lily suspects he wants to merge his flock with George's, but their meeting turns sour fast. George grows furious and throws Caleb out. The sheep, overhearing the shouting, feel a wave of disappointment. Whatever plan there was to bring the 2 flocks together has clearly fallen apart, so they decide to simply forget the whole thing. And that's a curious little ability these sheep have. All of them, except for Moople, can erase a bad memory just by closing their eyes and counting to 3. It's how they keep their lives pleasant, holding on to only the good and letting the rest slip away. George's mood stays dark that day. When Lily comes to check on him, he tells her he's just fine.
You don't have to worry. You'll be okay.
Over in Denbrook, a journalist arrives to cover the town's upcoming festival. Around the same time, a batch of mail comes into Beth's inn, and among it she spots a letter written by George. Her curiosity gets the better of her. The postwoman explains that the letter is bound for a Rebecca Hamsty in America, that George and Rebecca have been writing to each other for a month now, and that the rose-scented paper marks it clearly as a love letter. The moment the postwoman turns to go, Beth quietly slips the letter into her pocket. The journalist introduces himself as Elliot Matthew, asking to be shown to the Grand Denbrook Cultural Festival. But the so-called festival turns out to be nothing more than 3 tables of exhibitors, with a €10 entry fee on top of it. Elliot is deflated. He came here hunting for a story worth telling, something that might earn him a promotion, and this certainly isn't it. That night, under a dark and cloudy sky, he gives up and drives out of Denbrook. Back at the pasture, the sheep wait for George to come read to them, but the rain and thunder keep him inside. The crashing storm terrifies the youngest lambs, so Lily asks Richfield to tell them a story to calm their nerves. He explains that sheep don't really die. They simply become clouds. And that rumble of thunder overhead is just another distant flock, dancing to bring down the rain that makes the grass grow thick and green. Lily gently tells the three little ones that one day they'll all become clouds too, just like her parents did, even though she can no longer remember what they look like. She asks Moople to explain how a sheep turns into a cloud, since he's the only one who remembers everything. Moople lets out a long sigh and agrees that yes, everyone becomes a cloud in the end. Far from all this comfort, Trump sleeps alone under nothing but an old kettle behind George's caravan. And in town, the night unfolds in fragments. Hillcott tucks away his collection money. Ham sharpens his butcher's knife. Beth finally reads George's stolen letter and flies into a rage. And Elliot crashes his car into a tree and has to have it towed. On his way back into Denbrook, Elliot spots a figure walking through the rain, guided by a single lamp. Meanwhile, Moople wakes to the thunder and glimpses Sebastian standing outside. And George, asleep in his caravan, is roused by a knock at the door. The next morning, Moople wakes to find Lily sitting close beside George. Lily thinks George is playing a game, the one where you lie still, and whoever moves first loses. But when Moople goes to check, the terrible truth becomes clear. George is dead, and something about his hands is strange. His left hand is stained blue, his right hand green. Grief settles over Lily. The flock gathers, stunned by the news, unable to believe it, and frightened about what will become of them, with no shepherd to care for them. Worse still, without George to tend to Richfield's illness, the old ram could die too. Lily urges the others to forget George, because remembering hurts too much. Moople refuses. But Richfield, their elder, agrees it's for the best. Then, just as the flock begins to let George slip away, Sebastian stops them. With quiet wisdom, he reminds them that George was a good friend, and good friends don't deserve to be forgotten. Out of nowhere, Zora asks why George was murdered. Lily is startled. How could Zora possibly know he was killed? Zora simply assumed, because in all those detective novels George read aloud, anyone who dies in the night was murdered. It's a childish leap, but it plants a seed in Lily's mind, and suddenly she starts to wonder. The scene shifts. Police and an ambulance arrive at the caravan. Elliot watches from a distance as the officers confirm what the sheep already know. George is gone. Caleb is there too, holding documents he'd wanted George to sign. But the moment he learns George is dead, he leaves in a hurry. When Derry asks why Ham has turned up, Caleb explains that the butcher was counting George's sheep, hoping to buy them. Lily and Moople slip around to the back of the caravan. Something bothers her. Why would George have gone outside without his hat and raincoat? Peering inside with Moople's help, she sees his hat and coat folded neatly, untouched. And she spots 2 glasses and a single bottle. Someone else was here last night. Elliot arrives to photograph the scene, sensing this could finally be his story. Derry declares that George most likely died of a heart attack, and that everything outside and around the caravan has already been searched and looks perfectly fine. He steps in, glances around, and announces that everything's fine, but Elliot notices what Derry misses. George's chair has been knocked over. He wonders aloud why a man having a heart attack would calmly walk outside on his own. Derry shrugs it off, suggesting maybe it just happened out there. Elliot doesn't buy it. He photographs the 2 glasses and points out that George wasn't alone last night. Derry, wounded in his pride and worried about his standing as an officer, stubbornly insists there was no murder, that George simply had a heart attack and wandered off. Meanwhile, clever Lily lays out her own theory to the flock. Sebastian is skeptical, but she presses on. Last night, someone George knew came to visit. They drank together. Then something happened. There were no wounds on his body, so he was likely poisoned. The green stain on his hand points to a struggle. The killer fled, and George died. To Lily, Derry is as useless as the bumbling policeman in those novels, so she rallies the flock to solve the case themselves. They start searching for clues, but sheep being sheep, their reasoning only goes so far, and they turn up nothing. So Lily asks if anyone saw anything the night of the murder. Moople admits he saw Sebastian outside. Instantly, the flock decides Sebastian must be the culprit, but Sebastian shuts that down fast. How could he possibly have poisoned George, gotten inside the caravan, and most importantly, why on earth would he ever want to? To Lily, oddly enough, it all makes a kind of sense. Then Trump speaks up, saying he saw George's ghost that night, rising up out of his body. He couldn't make out the face, but it smelled like George. Because the flock never takes Trump seriously, Lily brushes him off. Just then, church bells ring out. Sebastian recognizes it as a call to a town meeting. surely about George, and decides to head into Denbrook. Lily and Moople insist on coming along, boldly claiming they aren't the least bit afraid to leave George's pasture, even though the truth is they're terrified. On the walk over, Sebastian keeps doubting whether Lily can actually crack this case. But Lily is 100% certain. She and Moople know exactly how murder mysteries get solved, thanks to all of George's crime novels. Sebastian only gently reminds them that the real world doesn't play out like a storybook. They reach Denbrook to find the townsfolk already gathered for the announcement. George, it's revealed, died sometime between 8 and 11 that night, poisoned by a toxin drawn from the fruit of the yew tree, a tree that happens to grow all around here. Then a luxury car rolls up, and out step two women. The young, beautiful one is Rebecca Hamsty, George's daughter. The older one is Lydia, George's lawyer. Derry speaks with Lydia. He mentions he's just been back to the scene to collect a letter from George's table. Lydia scolds herself for being careless. She'd only glance at that letter without reading it, and it turns out to be important. It's a will, and it names several people. Reverend Hillcott, Caleb, Beth, Ham, Derry, and finally Rebecca. Lydia decides to stay at Beth's Inn while the case unfolds and asks Derry to gather everyone named at 5 that evening so she can read the will aloud. Before she goes, she drops a bombshell on Derry. Rebecca was already in the country when the murder took place. Evening arrives. The sheep gather behind the inn, but the window to the meeting room is blocked by tall grass. Lily sends Moople to find another window so they can watch the faces inside and read who might be lying, while she and Sebastian start chewing away at the grass to clear their view. Inside, Elliot has shown up uninvited, sniffing out another angle for his story. He asks about Rebecca's mother. George's account was that she died giving birth to Rebecca, and that George, young and poor and afraid to raise a child, gave the baby up for adoption through the church. Even Hillcott never knew any of this. Derry then asked Rebecca whether it's true she was already in the country the day of the murder. Fidgeting nervously with her bracelet, Rebecca admits she was, though she hadn't yet reached Denbrook itself. To Lily and Sebastian, watching through the grass, Rebecca doesn't look the least bit sad. Outside, Moople is still hunting for a window when a carrot catches his eye. He goes for it and promptly gets his head stuck. Back inside, Rebecca explains she came here hoping to meet George. It also comes out that she has a twin sibling living in South Africa. Then Lydia sweeps in and throws Elliot out, since he has no business being there. Out back, as Moople struggles to free himself, we catch a glimpse of a cloth marked with a green stain. Lydia phones Peter Van Foren, Rebecca's brother in South Africa, so he can hear the will as well. George had sent Lydia a will 2 months earlier, but the one she's about to read is a newer version, the one Derry found in the caravan. In it, George reveals he gathered these particular people on purpose. He writes of a fool, a bad shepherd, a spring lamb, and a winter lamb, 1 victim, and 2 killers. At the mention of 2 killers, the room erupts in panic and the fear that another victim might be coming. Elliot overhears the commotion from the next room. Lydia settles everyone down and continues reading. To her son, Peter goes 120 hectares of land, the parcel currently rented out to Caleb. And to Rebecca goes the adjoining 120 hectares, along with the caravan, the barn, and all the sheep. In the earlier will, George had planned to donate the rest of his estate to an animal protection charity. But in this new version, everything else goes to Rebecca. A fertilizer spreader, 3 bags of fertilizer, and a money market account holding $30 million. The room is stunned that George had that kind of fortune. To Lily, this is a motive. George earned all that money 2 years ago when he created a cure for ORF, that very blue liquid we saw at the start, and sold the patent to an agricultural company. Meanwhile, Moople, still stuck, panics and comes crashing right into the meeting, his face buried in a piece of cloth. In the chaos he causes, Derry discovers George's letter to Rebecca, only for Beth to snatch it away instantly. Moople, blinded by that green-stained cloth over his face, is finally wrestled under control by Caleb. Later that night, once it's all over, Elliot approaches Derry, angling for any statement or clue for his story. But Derry has nothing to say, mostly because he truly has nothing. So Elliot proposes a deal. They team up. If Derry cracks the case, he becomes the hero, and Elliot gets the story that lands him a promotion. As a gesture of good faith, Elliot shares something. Around 8 the night of the murder, while his car was being towed back toward Denbrook, he saw someone with a flashlight near George's barn, and with that, the unlikely partnership begins. Back at the pasture, Lily explains her thinking to the flock, but they get it all wrong, assuming she's already solved everything the way she solves those detective novels. Lily reminds them this is the real world, and it isn't so easy. Then it hits her. Maybe those very books hold the answer. A flashlight appears in the dark. It's Rebecca, searching for something. Trump wanders up to her, and she gently lifts him into her arms. Cloud remarks that Rebecca smells just like George, even though she looks nothing like him. Once Rebecca leaves, Lily leads Moople and the others into the caravan, hoping to find George's book about recognizing motive and opportunity, the one with a train on the cover. Zora starts to grab it, but Wool Eyes barges in, insisting his nose knows best and takes over. That same night, as Derry pores over Elliot's photographs, he hears a thud outside. He steps out cautiously and finds the very book the sheep had taken. Still that same night, Lily finds Sebastian at his favorite spot, and there she learns his story. Long ago, Sebastian was a beloved fixture in town, petted and fed by everyone, and it made him happy. But as he grew, he was taken to a carnival and thrown into a ring to fight dogs, night after night, until he bled. One evening, George came and rescued him from that life. Lily wonders why Sebastian never joined the flock, and the answer is simple. He's a winter lamb, sharing the same lonely fate as Trump. With that, Sebastian walks off into the night. By morning, Derry is staring blankly at his window, watching Moople and Lily out in the field, when Elliot storms in, frustrated by the officer's stillness. But Derry has been up all night reading the book, and now he understands. Every murder comes down to three things: method, motive, and opportunity. He works through it. The method is the U-toxin, and every suspect had access to it. As for motive, only one is clear so far: Rebecca and the money. The rest still needs digging. First, Ham. His place in the will hints he could be a killer, but there's no proof. Then Beth. Derry wants to know why George's letter was in her hands and why she once said she wanted him dead. Beth flares up, insisting she's no killer but a victim herself. Caleb had recently gone to George asking to extend his land lease, only to be turned down, likely because George knew perfectly well what a poor shepherd he was. Then there's Hillcott. George never attended Sunday service, yet he kept dropping off money because he was hoping the church would tell him where his children were. But the church's rules were strict, and Hillcott genuinely didn't know, so he simply let George keep donating toward the building's repairs. Finally, Rebecca. Derry asks where she was between 8 and 11 that night, and she claims she was still at the airport. He asks if her real name is Chastity Crams. He's dug into her past, uncovering an old boyfriend who was a criminal, a man known for forging documents. Rebecca denies all of it. He asks if she ever went near a yew tree. Never, she says. And finally, whether she'd ever been to George's place before. Here, Rebecca lies, insisting she never had. Lily heads home, dizzy from everything she's heard. Cloud tells her to stop torturing herself, that Rebecca is obviously the culprit, but Trump rushes over in protest. Rebecca isn't the killer, he insists. She's kind. She smells like George, and that word snags in Lily's mind. Cloud had said the exact same thing the night before. How, Lily wonders, could Cloud possibly have known Rebecca's scent from so far away? At last, Cloud confesses. She'd been hiding Rebecca's bracelet, drawn to the endless circle of it. The night of the murder, Cloud saw Rebecca come to the pasture. Rebecca called her beautiful and stroked her, and in that moment the bracelet slipped off. So there it is, Lily concludes, with physical evidence to match. Rebecca is the killer. Then Sebastian appears and fiercely objects, but Lily holds her ground, dismissing Rebecca as a fraud and a liar, and worst of all, a winter lamb. That last insult lands hard, and Sebastian storms away. Lily and Moople head back into town. Moople swipes Derry's hat and leads the officer out to the pasture to reveal the bracelet.
Thank you all.
Then Derry, along with Elliot and Beth, knocks on Rebecca's door. He holds up the bracelet, and sure enough, it's hers. Her lie unravels, since she'd claimed she never went to George's place. Derry produces a search warrant, and inside her room he finds her boots, marked with traces of yew fruit. Rebecca protests that she never touched a yew tree, that she never killed her father. But the evidence seems undeniable, and Derry places her under arrest. Rebecca is taken in for questioning, with Lily listening from outside. She admits she was in George's barn the night of the murder, but swears she didn't kill him. She explains that George had sent her the old will, the one without the $30 million, and that all he'd ever wanted was to meet his daughter. So she flew here. They talked, they met, they spoke about the sheep. George told her all their names and said he wanted her to have every one of them. She insists it was just the two of them, and that everything else she'd said, she'd only lied about out of fear. Derry can't bring himself to believe her. Rebecca is placed in a cell to be transferred to the district court the next day. Outside, Derry runs into Lydia, who praises him for finally acting less like a fool. She also mentions that Peter has agreed to sell his land to Caleb. That night, Lily looks lost. When Moople asks what's wrong, she asks him whether Rebecca really is the killer. Moople tells her, yes, he believes her, he trusts her. But that only deepens her doubt. The whole flock believes Rebecca is guilty, not because they know it, but simply because Lily said so. Then Moople leads her toward Caleb's neighboring pasture, where their supposed new shepherd's flock lives. The mood there is unsettling. When they finally meet Caleb's sheep, they aren't welcomed at all. Instead, the flock frantically urges Lily and Moople to run. Then comes the sound of barking dogs, and Caleb's sheep scatter. But instead of fleeing, Lily and Moople press on out of curiosity and stumble upon a factory. Moople begs her to leave, but she keeps going until she finds a box stamped with a sheep logo, sliced clean through. And the horrible truth lands. Sheep don't become clouds. They become meat. Caleb and Ham have been in this business together. Suddenly, two dogs charge, and a desperate chase begins. Sebastian throws himself in and saves Lily and Moople, but he's mortally wounded. Lily, racked with guilt, asks why he ever came back for them. His last words are that they are his flock, and then Sebastian is gone. Caleb appears with his flashlight, and Lily and Moople bolt. She races home and wakes the others, begging them to leave the barn, but they're all too afraid to cross. So Lily tells them the truth. She just watched Sebastian die. The flock objects. Didn't she herself say sheep don't die? That they turn into clouds? No, Lily tells them. That was all a lie. Zora cuts her off and rallies the others to simply forget this painful thing. Lily pleads with them not to, because death is real, because it's the truth. She turns to Ronnie and Reggie, begging them to remember. But it's too late. They've already forgotten and drifted back to the barn. Only Moople is left at her side, and Lily is struck by regret at how much she's chosen to forget. Moople has witnessed it all. Time and again, she's erased the deaths of other sheep, while he has never let a single memory go. Remembering hurts, he admits, but it's also how he still holds on to his mother, his friends, all the good and the bad alike. For a moment, Lily returns to the flock, choosing to forget too, because she isn't as strong as Sebastian or Moople. And then she sees George. They talk. George tells her she's the cleverest of all the sheep, but that Moople is the wisest. He tells her he once lost someone, and it hurt terribly. But in the end, all that remained were the good things. He asked Lily to uncover the truth and save the rest of the flock. He asked her to focus. And finally, she realizes something. The most important clue was always on the victim himself. George shows her his hands, and in that instant, Lily understands. Rebecca isn't the killer. She races behind the caravan straight to the paint cans, but her legs are too short to reach. Then Trump pipes up that his legs will fit. Lily has him dip one hoof into the yellow paint and the other into the blue, and together they hurry to the police station. Rebecca watches from her cell as Trump follows Lily's instructions, baffled by all the bleeding. Trump knocks down Derry's evidence board, then begins to paint across the floor, and once he's done, they slip away. The next morning, as Ronnie and Reggie graze and a car passes by, they find themselves half remembering Lily's words from the night before, faint traces of something awful. But they decide to simply follow the trail of paint and cross over anyway. At the station, Derry arrives to find the place in disarray. Rebecca tells him it was the sheep. Derry notices a blue line running from Rebecca's photo toward George's, and from George's photo, a line of blue flowing down into a mix of blue and yellow that becomes green. But with his limited grasp of things, he understands none of it. He wipes at the wet paint, smearing his own hand green in the process. Moople, Trump, and Lily reach town just as the district police arrive to collect Rebecca. Derry is asked to sign off. Hesitant, he signs. Then he catches sight of Trump's painted hooves and of his own green-stained hand, and it all clicks. He rushes to stop the officers taking Rebecca away, suddenly certain she isn't the killer. Now Derry remembers. From the moment Rebecca arrived in Denbrook, she was set up to be the prime suspect. She went to George's farm, she lied, and every bit of it played right into the real killer's hands. A killer no one suspected. Someone who never made the suspect list at all. Someone with an airtight alibi. Someone who wasn't even in the country. It was Peter Van Foren, Rebecca's twin brother. Rebecca had said her father sent her a copy of the old will, and surely he sent one to Peter as well. Peter looked into George's fortune and became determined to have that $30 million, no matter who he had to kill. Here the motive falls into place. If George left the inheritance to Peter, Peter would become a suspect. But if George left it to Rebecca, then Rebecca could be arrested for the crime, and the $30 million would pass to Peter instead. The only question left is where Peter was hiding, and the answer is that he hid in plain sight, changing his name just as Rebecca had once become Chastity, only now Peter had become Elliot Matthew. He was the very ghost of George that Trump described. Elliot tries to deny it, insisting he's always lived in this country, that he's never been to Africa, that he's just a journalist. Derry concedes it might seem that way. But the truth is, George told Elliot that Rebecca was coming, and Elliot used it to trap his own sister. He invented a reason to visit Denbrook by asking to cover the festival. His plan was simple: leave town, stage a convenient car breakdown, and return so no one would suspect him. That night, once Rebecca had left George, Elliot carried it out. He came to his father, who welcomed him warmly, inviting him in and pouring him a drink, into which Elliot slipped the U-poison. But once his father collapsed and Elliot planted the new will, George proved stronger than expected. He rose and fought back. In the struggle, George's right hand grabbed a fistful of Elliot's hair, but in the end he died anyway, leaving Elliot only to wait for Rebecca to walk into the trap. At the reading of the will, Elliot deliberately showed up knowing he'd be thrown out, because it gave him a reason to phone Lydia. And afterward, he planted U-fruit in Rebecca's boots. It was all nearly perfect. What he never realized was the clue left on George's hands. The left hand blue, the right hand green. The blue came from George's own medicine, and blue mixed with yellow makes green. But where did that yellow come from? The same green stain marked the cloth back at the inn, which turned out to be Elliot's pillowcase. That rainy night, both of George's hands were blue when he seized Elliot's yellow hair. Elliot had used a cheap hair dye that ran in the rain, and the yellow bled into the blue, turning George's hand green. Before coming, Elliot had changed his whole appearance, so he'd resemble neither George nor his own sister. Even faced with all of this, Elliot still denies it, insisting none of it can be proven. So Derry plucks a single hair from Elliot's head. Elliot doesn't object, even admitting he wasn't born blonde, not realizing what Derry intends. That hair is for a DNA test. If it proves Elliot is really Peter, George's son, then he's the killer beyond doubt. Elliot finally acknowledges Derry's cleverness, tosses the hair aside, and makes a run for it. But just then Ronnie and Reggie arrive, and Lily sends them charging into Elliot's car. At last, the real killer is caught. Rebecca is freed, and she decides to settle in Denbrook. The next morning, as she checks out of the inn, Beth waives the bill as an apology for stealing George's letter. Beth had been jealous, believing Rebecca was George's lover. The rose scent on that paper, it turns out, came from a perfume Beth herself had given George. Now she understands. George turned her away because he wasn't ready to open his heart to anyone, and finally she knows why. Then Rebecca asks what her mother's name was, admitting she never even knew it. Beth tells her the name was Lily. Rebecca meets with Lydia, who reveals that Elliot's new will was a forgery and legally worthless. All of George's land passes to Rebecca, while the $30 million will go, as George originally intended, to animal protection. Then Caleb and Ham show up, offering to buy the land and the sheep. But Rebecca refuses. The two killers George named in his will were these very men, the ones who had always been slaughtering his sheep. Now the tables turn. It's Rebecca who buys Caleb's sheep instead, stepping into George's role and leading a new flock onto her land. Rebecca becomes a shepherd, just like her father, carrying on his every habit. Out in the field, Lily finds Trump resting in Sebastian's old spot. She invites him to join the flock at last, and she gives him a name, George, and with that, he officially belongs. And so the film comes to an end. So the moral of the story is never trust a guy who suddenly changes his hair color, because cheap dye exposes criminals better than the police.